So I'd love to introduce Sharon. She's our guest here for our global product marketing viewpoint on how to build customer advisory boards, how to lead them. So she, driven many major go-to-market initiatives. She's also been asked to go to Australia to relocate for QuickBooks to run international expansion there. She didn't think about sales, but she really thought about how to bridge advocacy and build a relationship. She's really known for being customer first, very thoughtful, thinking about both wins. And that's how she's been building customer advisory boards. I am thrilled to have her here because a lot of experts sort of kind of keep to themselves, and it's just something we do, but it's time for us to share, to get out there. Let's share what happens in the advisory board. And she's also the founder of Your Career Wings. She's providing career coaching for people who are looking for that next level of growth. So welcome, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you, Irene, so much for having me. And thank you for everyone that joined and excited to connect.
Yeah. All right. So let's dive right into it. Like, can you share a time when, these CAB insights that you've, created, like, did they help you with messaging, product direction, campaign strategy? Because I
Mhm.
think a lot of the product marketing does a lot of the heavy lifting to build the connections and the CAB slides.
Definitely. No. Great question. So yeah, I can provide you a few examples in terms
Mhm.
of how customer advisory board or CABs
Yeah.
insights have actually influenced strategic decisions as well as business outcomes. So, as a first example, when I was at LinkedIn,
Mm.
uh, you know, we were looking to roll out a new product, and LinkedIn already had a quarterly cadence with the customer advisory board, which really allowed marketers as well as product managers to have quick access to insights, not much red tape, which is
Good.
just super important and super efficient. So with that, when we were rolling out a new product, it was important to engage them, particularly to refine our customer segment in terms of the launch, as well as to make sure we had the right messaging. And then, in addition to getting that input, what was really helpful was that you then had, because leadership team already knows who's on the customer advisory board, you have your internal team that you're working with in terms of your cross-functional stakeholders, but also leadership just to have more confidence when you're going to roll out.
Oh, yeah.
And so after that launch, we were able to improve our CSAT scores, which is customer satisfaction scores. So just very impactful. I think that at the end of the day, when you do have a very structured customer advisory board program like that,
Mhm.
it just really allows you to get that input when you need it and then make those, impactful decisions. I think when we talk about my time at Intuit,
Mm.
um, as it relates to engaging, really shaping a customer advisory board, we can talk more about how they actually did more so
That's great.
influence the product.
So
Well, I
go
guess
ahead.
was going to ask you, since you're
Yeah.
asking me questions, I was going to ask you. Um, Obviously, you've been really working with a lot of different clients, and I think on
Mhm.
everyone's mind right now is the AI narrative. And I'm
Mhm.
curious if you have worked with any clients on that and to talk a little bit about your approach.
Yeah, I'd love to give you a couple examples. One's in cybersecurity, and the other is in SaaS. And what's really interesting is this discussion, the C-suite discussion on still governance, change management. They're exchanging ideas. So both the vendor who's running the customer advisory board, they're showing, hey, this is how we're using AI. This is how we're building AI into the platform. What do you think? But they're also building a lot more connection and trust because they're
Mhm.
exchanging ideas on how do you govern AI inside your teams? How do you get other people to run AI on? Because there are a lot of people that are still very leery about AI and they don't want to embrace AI. So we talked a lot about that. Cabs are somewhat like therapy, but they also create this new human trust in a board. And so now we have, whether it's the cybersecurity or the SaaS, these customers raised their hand. They said, "Hey, I want to work with you. I want to be on your early design or your beta.
Hmm.
I want to actually apply the AI. Send us your addendum for AI. We'll review it and we'll start working together." I think that that's like the new topic for cabs. It's not just the roadmap. It's really coming together to talk about and learn from both sides, the vendor side
Hmm.
and the customer side. But yeah, so let's actually kind of move on to you. I wanted to ask, Sharon, to quantify value. You've probably been put like when you went to Australia, right? Like, or any company when running a cab. I'd love to explore how you've been able to measure success because that's always right now, especially in these economic times. What should they do? This? Should they do that?
Yeah, no, definitely figuring out how to allocate resources. I think that's a
Mhm.
good question. I think sometimes, customer advisory programs can fall short as it relates to that. I do think it is important to tie when you are getting customer insights to business outcomes. So, as an example, right at LinkedIn, if you're getting input on messaging, you might be able to look at pre and post conversion rates. If
Mhm.
you are getting input on a new product feature. How does that reflect the broader market when you roll that out, and what does adoption
Yeah.
look like?
Yeah.
Those I think are important things. I think also you're bringing, like you said, well, you said a therapy session. I don't know if it's a therapy session, but ultimately, when you're bringing a team together, it's also like how well are you engaging the customer, the members, right, of the customer advisory board, and how quickly are you taking the actions that you've prioritized
Yeah.
into market or into the internal team to figure out how to take it to market.
Yeah.
Those are some examples. I do think, though, you know, you're also like beyond just the numbers, you're getting a certain level of unfiltered feedback from customers.
Mhm.
It's meant to be a trusted space
Yes.
for conversation. There's this incredible team alignment that I think does happen as a result of it.
Yeah.
Um, and it's hard to place a value on that, but I think that's really important. I also think that when you do have a customer potentially giving feedback that is prioritized directly to the CEO, that might
Mhm.
happen pretty quickly and move things faster than an internal memo or something
Mhm.
like that.
Mhm.
So those are things I think ultimately it's just figuring out how are those insights impacting
Yeah.
different go-to-market initiatives, and how can you measure that? I
Yeah.
don't know if you would add anything to that just from your perspective
Yeah.
and working with cabs.
You actually said it so well, but I think also I just want to talk about time. There's so much like decision making, there's short term, there's long term strategies, there's tactics. And I think all coming together, both the customer and the vendor gets to validate a lot of things like different use cases. How should they look at the market? Then you build this sort of small cadre, this group that you can have these ongoing conversations. So it is a very, in a sense, soft metric, but these metrics really help shape like the long form, that long tail thinking, the strategy that you have in mind, asking customers about their thoughts of competition. And then the other thing is if you actually look like 6 months later, you'll notice
Mhm.
actually the ROI will pay for itself, meaning the cab will pay for itself because a lot of the customers, by exchanging ideas and learning from their use cases, end up actually holistically buying new product or more product. And that just
Mhm.
happens. Not from us. Thanks
Makes
for
sense.
asking me. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So we both have so much passion around customers, global markets. Even been asked from Intuit to go out and establish, or I think maybe reestablish this customer marketing, or you really took a lead. Can you kind of go into your experiences around that?
I basically led the QuickBooks expansion internationally with a focus on Australia. And at the
Mm.
time, Australia was considered a challenger market,
Oh.
in which, the customer segment, which are primarily accountants that support small businesses, already had the tools that they were using and that they felt that they
Mm.
needed. And so, given it was a challenger market, it was important for me to actually relocate there to understand the local market as
Mm,
well as just get to know the team.
right.
And so where, part of my role was also, you know, looking into the customer advisory program and understanding what's working and what's not. And I think that the cab that was set up in Australia, particularly, was very training focused, which
Mm,
can be helpful. However, if you're already in a very competitive market, it's
mhm,
extremely important to have members of your cab be advocates because no one's really maybe heard of Intuit or QuickBooks. You want to hear it from the customers. I mean, you always want to hear it from the customers, but even
mhm,
more so in that type of an environment. So to really shift, if you will, from a training oriented program to one that's more of an advocacy program where there's speaking engagements or different ways they can, the show versus tell
mhm.
was really important.
I love that. Well, first, I want to say that's so powerful because you actually said, "Hey, this is not the right thing to do in terms of it's not no training." But I think you brought up a
Right.
really good point. You have to speak up, and I think oftentimes when you're building out a CAB program, kind of comes from the top up. We should have a CAB. This is what we should do. But then after learning about that market and learning that it's a challenger market, you made a change and you wanted to be thoughtful, like, hey, let's actually have more conversation. Let's learn from each other. And yes, training can be a component, but it shouldn't
Yes.
be the lead, right? So I love that.
Right. And I
Okay.
think also as it relates to that, as you think about global and scaling, it is important to really listen with intent, observe, and make sure you're doing things globally, but executing locally. And so I think one of the things that came out of that was also just connecting the members of the Australia cab with the US cab, just
Yes.
to have that community connection.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
then you still get learnings from that region that you could probably apply to other regions like the UK or
Absolutely.
another one,
Yeah,
where the US already being quite established had kind of a different maturity level.
absolutely. Or they need to validate something because maybe, like, so for example, Macquarie Bank might have an
Mhm.
office in San Francisco and in New York, and they want to figure out, oh, should they buy tier two storage or should they be adding, I don't know, this new cloud, right? And so they want to actually get a sense from colleagues outside of their probably business groups to
Mhm.
network, right? And get advice.
Definitely.
When you started a cab, did you have resources? Are there any resources today? Like if you were to run a cab, I'm just curious, and what would you do now differently?
Yeah, I think that as a product marketer, I think it's very important if you do have an existing cab at your company
Mhm.
to make sure you're included. If you
Absolutely.
can't be in part of literally a seat at the table, you can at least still offer input in terms of getting feedback and getting insights that you actually can take action on, whether it's the short term or the long term. I think that's the first thing. I think, the second thing is if you don't have a cab, start with a customer. And it's better to start than not start. So I know we all like things to go a certain way, but
Yeah.
I do think it's just think about your customer, start to listen, start to get a few folks together. You don't
Mhm.
necessarily have to completely formalize it just yet because you're also learning together and learning who puts in
Mhm.
the time and how you are engaging. But to me, it's just start to learn, start to set up what are the objectives of the cab and so forth.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have I see right next to you a banner of build a world class customer
You got a
advisory
white.
board book. Yes, yes. No, I think the book is actually a great how-to. There's no fluff. So I think whether you're an executive and you need to flip through a few pages to just get a sense of what are we talking about here or how can I best engage the team to move forward on it.
Mhm.
It works as well as someone that's like, wait, how do I really get started here? Like what happens in this situation versus that? I think it's an amazing
Thank
um and I think again, fourth, like probably for those that have joined the call today, feel free to reach out to me if you are currently in the process trying to figure out, like from a customer marketing or product marketing perspective, how to engage your cab. I'm happy to chat.
Yeah.
If you're also, I know that some people are looking to transition or upskill. I do offer coaching, so also happy to engage on that.
Nice.
Um, yeah, but overall, I'm just really appreciative that we could have a quick chat about how do you actually take insights to action, leverage a cab from a product marketing perspective to really drive results.
Yeah, I think it's frankly a call to action. If you're in product marketing, don't let all the product management people have all the fun. Get in there, roll up your sleeves, help. Um, when I build a cab, when I started my career in customer marketing, I was under product marketing. And so we actually did a lot of the field work in building up the customer advisory board. Often now they're led by product management, but I think product marketers need to also build that partnership, and it should be 50-50 because there's this great synergy where it's not always about the product. When you're talking to business people, you're also learning about what their pain points, what are they thinking about, what are their challenges, and that for us to listen not on just the product side but also helps us with positioning
Mhm.
because they might change their whole positioning. I mean, they might give us an idea where we might have to change our positioning, or it might help us with a new campaign or how to reach out to customers or existing customers or net new customers. So thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate it. I love
Definitely.
that lens. I love that lens that you bring and that international lens. I totally agree. That's like a bumper sticker, like think globally but act locally. I love
Yes.
that. There is a question to you. How have you positioned the cab as a value so to your customers?
So,
Your
well, yeah,
customers.
so as an example, when I was in Australia and we had an existing customer advisory board of a few folks,
Mhm.
a lot is actually it was interesting. I actually interviewed them as well as, key stakeholders internally to understand what's working, what's not, to then figure out what is that right value. Because what was happening is the training program, it just wasn't enough from a company perspective. And I think it also really wasn't enough from the members. So I think it's trying to figure out like what are you solving for and what's in
Mhm.
it for them versus what's in it for you and how do you kind of bridge that gap
Yeah,
or blend that together, if you will, for moving forward.
love
So it's
it.
really having that common understanding.
Well, that's like perfect. I think we should do more. We should have more of these live events because it's that mission. Got to build that CAB mission statement first
Hmm.
internally. What's the North Star? Why are you coming together to build this CAB? And it takes a little, or maybe actually a lot of vulnerability when you're having those one on one conversations with those CAB members who've been nominated. Why are you doing this? So you usually formalize the mission beforehand, you read it out to them, and then you kind of want to share around that. Well, how did you get to that? Hey, we're struggling. We want to go up market, but we don't know what we know. We need your help to help us how to get there. That's happened at Ring Central. They were growing really fast. They wanted to go up market. They invited a lot of new leaders to join, but we all had different thinking. So we needed to sit down and talk to our customers to lead us to building that up market. And we did that. We listened. We had ongoing conversations. So with the question back to Carolyn's question, what's in it for the customer or how do you drive the
Hmm.
value? Is that mission statement. Be vulnerable. Show them what the agenda is going to be like and ask them to pick it apart because by having that conversation, having that exercise, that back and forth, you can actually see if that customer is really engaged and what kind of value that they can bring and what kind of value that you can bring. So sometimes I say, okay, that was a great idea. Let me take that idea back and maybe we might change or add that to the agenda. So I want CAB members to feel that they have a say even early on when we build out the agenda.
Hmm.
We think we know, right, as the vendor, but I think it's also really important when you're talking to customers ahead to show them the value that you might get new insights to change and make your agenda, your CAB agenda even better. Yeah. Thank you for that question. Sharon, tell me,
Yes.
like, do you get like folks that are kind of coming out of college these days looking for help for for career coaching? Or are you looking for, are there people kind of, wanting to change careers or
Yeah,
like,
so I think that, yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I don't really work with marketers, but
Mhm.
ultimately, having worked in the industry, having dealt with my own transition, whether it's
Yeah.
function, geography, industry. Oftentimes, I'm working with clients, who are going, saying, "Well, I'm currently in this job, but I want to go to this. How do I get there? Right? What are
Yeah.
those transferable skills?" As well as people that want to upskill. Um, so, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So, in certain fields, particularly product marketing, partnership marketing, and so forth, how do you start to make sure you understand your gaps and how can you solve for those gaps to make sure you have the skill set and the confidence to succeed in that next role? So it's really solving for each client on what they're looking for. So usually you would already have a few years of experience and so forth for engaging a career coach.
All right. Well, you hear that. You get a real insider with sharing if you
Mhm.
need any help when you're trying to transition or look for something new.
So thank you.
I haven't taken a session, but I think you'd be fantastic as we're practicing and doing this dry run. I've just learned a wealth of just who you are, and I'm just so grateful that you came on here to share. It's always important, and I just love getting to know you. And I'm so glad that we got to connect over LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a small world, guys. You can
It
find great
is.
people like Sharon, and hit it off. So
And Irene is all about building community. And I think that's such an important lens when you think about customer advisory boards. So whether it's taking a look at the book or I trust just reaching out, I'm sure she's more than happy to have a conversation because, we need to learn together. And that's part of, I think,
absolutely.
being in a community.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think we should let everyone go back to their day or their evening. And thank you, everyone. And sorry for
Yeah.
the mix up. And have a great day. And again, Sharon, thank you for this time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.